begin offering a third booster shot, less than 2% of some people in developing countries have even had their first.
Well, Lucy, there are reports he'll announce a significant new purchase of COVID vaccines to share with the world and also set donation targets for other advanced nations. At the UN yesterday, he said the U.S. has already shared more than 160 million doses in 100 countries and has committed to purchasing 500 million shots. You can expect him to expand that commitment today.
How realistic are these pledges?
Well, there are certainly critics who are pushing the U.S. and other countries to fulfill their promises faster. The World Health Organization says just 15% of promised vaccine donations have actually been delivered by rich countries. The exact timeline for Mr. Biden's pledges is not clear at this point.
Bradley, will he also face some tough questions around the fact that he is actually promoting a booster shot, a third vaccine dose for all US citizens, at a time when less than 2% of people in the developing world have even had one?
That's right. He will certainly face some sharp questions about that. There has been real criticism over the president's call for booster shots, but those questions at this point are not new. And the White House has argued that the U.S. can do both: stockpile booster shots and donate vaccines abroad. The vaccine manufacturers argue that boosters are necessary, but Lucy, it's important to note that health authorities here in the U.S. have not signed off on the widespread use of boosters here yet, and that is despite President Biden's plan to distribute them.
Let's take you live now to Rhoda Adeyembo, our Africa health correspondent, who joins us now from Nairobi. Rhoda, just give us the bigger picture in Africa. What's needed most and where?
Well, Lucy, what's needed most right now in the African continent is COVID-19 vaccines. Most of the vaccines that have already been approved by the World Health Organization for use, and these are the vaccines that are being used globally. So currently, right now, many countries, about 7 countries, are battling a fierce fourth wave, and they're currently in need of COVID-19 vaccines to prevent people from becoming severely ill.
Vaccines are in fact provided. Are the delivery systems operational and working in these countries to get them into people's arms?
Oh yes, the African continent does have a good history of rolling out mass vaccination programs. We've seen African governments through their health, through doctors, nurses, being able to roll out Ebola vaccines, polio. So if more COVID-19 vaccines are being available, then countries will find a way looking for vaccines, but are not able to find them because which are enough to vaccinate. So that's why there's a lot of call by African governments to the World Health Organization and Africa Centers for Disease Control for rich countries to be able to donate vaccines to them, especially those who have surplus vaccines.
And Rhoda, is there an issue around vaccine hesitancy in Africa?
At the beginning, before COVID-19 vaccines were rolled out, yes, vaccine hesitancy was an issue. But right now, the bigger issue that countries are dealing with here is vaccine accessibility. We've seen right now that COVAX earlier on was say that it was not going to meet the demands of supply. A huge chunk were made available, then many people will be vaccinated and they would stand a better chance, just like rich countries have been able to vaccinate a huge chunk of their own population.
Rhoda, good to see you. Thanks for joining us from Nairobi. And we will be live in Japan with Alvin Lin from the National Resources Defense Council a little later. We're going to talk about another big important building new coal-fired power station. Gabby Petito, who went on a road trip with her boyfriend. The 22-year-old blogger was reportedly missing earlier this month after she quit her job for the adventure with her boyfriend. He has been declared a person of interest by the police and has refused to cooperate with them before going missing himself. The UN has expressed deep concern over mass deportations of Haitian migrants from the United States, warning they could go against international law. The head of the UN Refugee Agency, Filippo Grandi, said he was shocked by images of the conditions beneath the concrete highway overpass in Texas. More than 14,000 people have gathered there in recent days. Paulie Garson, the actor best known for playing flamboyant talent agent Sandra Blatch in the original series of Sex and the City, has died. He was 57. Tributes have been paid to the actor who reprised his role recently on the has not been disclosed.
There's been an earthquake in the Australian state of Victoria. It damaged buildings in Melbourne and caused tremors hundreds of kilometres away. Geologists say the quake is the largest in southeast Australia since the 1800s. Have a look at this video. This is Marco Dillon shares really trend there. Well, I've been speaking to the man himself from his home in Melbourne to hear what the experience was like for him.
Nothing really interesting happening this morning, and we're just sort of here having a video call meeting. And just suddenly, like under my chair, I could just feel that the chair just moving, like weirdly, like there was like the ground was sort of like trembling. I didn't think of it, thinking it was maybe just a building or something was going on, or somebody was doing some work. And then suddenly, just from the right side, you could just see the wall shaking. You could hear this shaking so violent, and I thought, God, I hope a plane's not going to crash through the apartment. As you could see from the video, it was just this shaking, and it was just this moment that I just sort of stood there and went, I don't know what to do. We've never had an earthquake, well, it wasn't in my time, so it was just,
Lots of people that might be commenting on how calm you were, that you thought, no, I can't let my take them into the kitchen. We don't want to mess.
Well, we don't want to mess exactly like that. That's my mother's fault. It won't have to be clean. But, what you couldn't see was there was things falling, like things were falling in the bathroom, in the bedroom. You could hear things sort of smashing around, and it was like, all I could see was just glass there. And as I was like thinking, oh, is the roof going to cave in? I thought, well, I don't want the glass to break. That's a little bit of mess for me to have to clean up. So, it was just funny, like it all happened all so fast. But while we were going through it, it felt like it was like at least 5-10 minutes, but it really was just like a minute.
Marco,
Of something, but
I'm from New Zealand, well used to shakes all the time. But can you tell our viewers just how unusual it is for people in Victoria to experience earthquakes like this?
you just don't. It's something that we've never ever had to go through. I think maybe once there might have been a small tremor that we didn't even feel. But afterwards there was this eerie silence in the building, and it took a few minutes before you started to hear people coming out thinking, is it safe? Like nobody knew what had happened. We figured that there was going to be like some Armageddon outside, with things collapsing, and we were all calling each other. Colleagues and people were crying because they were in the house on their own and they didn't know what was going on. So it's something that we've never experienced before.
Pleased that Marco and everyone in his apartment building is well, and we are hearing there are no reports really of any injury from Victoria. So a big shock for people, but it's damage at the moment. You're live with Lucy Hawkins, still to come. We're here from the Spanish island of La Palma, where a powerful volcano has been erupting for a third day. And we'll take you live to Japan as well. We'll be finding out how much this difference, this new pledge from China on its coal-fired plants will make overall to global warming.
Stock trading to get shares in the world's biggest companies. You also don't have to get everything online to get America, everything Europe, or everything Britain to get Forex like American dollars, euros, or British pounds. Download Shift, the global money app, and get the world. Standard Bank, it can be. Via is about real people, real stories. We cook food, hang out together, get married, have disagreements, and fall in love. Authentic, unfiltered, and original. Let's bride, celebrate, and socialize together. Via, it's the real deal.
Live with Lucy Hawkins. The US climate envoy John Kerry has said he's delighted about a promise from China to stop building new coal-fired power stations abroad. Mr. Kerry has been lobbying China to act and said it was an important decision to tackle global warming. President Xi making the announcement in his speech at the UN General Assembly. It's just a month, remember, before we have that crucial global summit on tackling climate change. Well,
China will strive to peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. This requires tremendous hard work, and we will make every effort to meet these goals.
And it is still adding new plants have a lifespan of about 40 to 50 years. The dots
important, but it does represent low-hanging fruit for China. So Xi Jinping says no new coal-fired power stations will be built abroad. China, and they were was China's fault. There are questions though about the detail. When will it be implemented? It was the man at the top who announced it at the UN, but will it be immediate? Will it apply to plants that are halfway through construction, or those that have been presumably will stop financing the plants that it will no longer build? But what about the state-owned banks? Will they also look to stop their financing of coal-fired power stations abroad? The big issue here, though, is China's domestic demand for coal. Half of the country. China is adding coal-fired power stations here, some of them with a lifespan of 50 years, and it expects to continue to increase its demand for coal for the next 5 years, up until 2026. So that is the key issue here. China's domestic demand for coal, that is what has to decrease in terms of significant steps in dealing with climate change.
Let's go live now to Elvin Lin, China Climate and Energy Director at the National Resources Defense Council, normally based in Beijing, but currently in Japan. Elvin, good to know.
This is a very significant announcement, and I think it gives us the momentum we need going into Glasgow at the beginning of November. It was not by any means, I think, a given that China would make this announcement. Certainly there has been a lot of diplomacy by figures like Alok Sharma, by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, that 2021 would indeed be the year when we would say no new coal. And China as really one of the largest of them now. That's a very big deal indeed.
Any indications that they're going to make a similar commitment about their stations at home, though, Elvin?
We would hope so. We have been seeing similar kinds of commitments on coal, not saying quite domestically that they will not build new coal power plants, but certainly similar efforts to reduce the share of coal in total energy consumption. That's fallen from 64% in 2015 to 57% last year. It's continuing to fall, and certainly there's pressure to wildfires, flooding, and the like that's happened in China. There are huge floods in Henan in central China, just as there were in Germany, just as there were wildfires in California and elsewhere. We really need that signal from top political leaders, whether that's President Xi, whether that's other leaders around the world. That's a really important signal because it sets in place the motion by enterprise, by banks, and it makes it clear that they need to shift all of their financing, all of their investments into green, into clean. And it also gives those groups that are within the road host countries, gives them now that they're not going to their own host country governments, but what to replace that with? How can you replace that with wind and solar?
And Albert, it does seem that President Xi is completely convinced now by the economic arguments around moving into this low carbon future.
Yeah, I think it's starting first, maybe with this huge announcement about overseas coal, but I think it's also happening domestically. And of course, China, like many other parts of the world, like the European Union, like the UK in previous decades, when you're talking about going from fossil fuels to clean energy, there are economic impacts on vulnerable communities like miners, for example. And we need to talk about what that just transition is, how to make sure that this clean transition is also a just transition, and that we take care of all of the workers who have been in these industries that are changing.
Alvin, it's always great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Top aide to the Ukrainian President Zelensky has survived an assassination attempt. Police said at least 10 bullets hit Serhiy Shurev's car as he left home. He emerged unscathed, but his driver was hit and is in hospital. Ukraine correspondent Jonah Fisher has more from Kiev.
This happened a couple of hours ago in an area on the outskirts of Kiev. Serhiy Shafir, who is, as you said, one of President Zelensky's closest aides, he dates back to before President Zelensky was President Zelensky. He was in the entertainment industry and he worked with him there. So a close contact who works very closely with him. This morning, the car that Mr. Shafir was in was targeted by what appears to have been machine gun fire. According to the police, it was hit 10 times. The driver of that car is in a serious condition. He was struck several times. Mr. Shafir himself, well, he seems to be okay. There are people who have spoken to him, but certainly the way it's being described by those close to President Zelensky here at the moment is this was an assassination attempt, and they're linking it to his work with the president.
And Jonah, President Zelensky, of course, is in New York right now for the UN General Assembly. Too early in the morning, perhaps, for him to be totally across this. But any reaction from him and his team there?
Yeah, we know he has been informed about it. What his team have been saying is that they have been obviously reluctant to speculate entirely, but they have been linking it with President Zelensky's actions to clamp down on oligarchs who have a huge amount of influence here in Ukraine. And in the last several months, President Zelensky has been talking a lot about trying to take on the oligarchs. There's legislation that's due to come up in Parliament, possibly even in the next few days, to try and tackle the power that these oligarchs have, both in terms of the economy and also media and political life here in Ukraine. So there are some who are suggesting there could perhaps be some link between this assassination attempt and President Zelensky's efforts to take on the oligarchs.
Now, since the pandemic began, you may have noticed a new kind of litter on the streets, all of those face masks. Now, young people in Cornwall in the southwest of England are taking part in an initiative to recycle them. Here's Laura Foster.
It's found it in the bush. At Pen Pond School near Camborne, pupils don't have to go too far from the school gates before they come across litter. And each picker they're using is made from used hospital protective equipment.
You can pick up a mask with these that are made out of masks. And I just think it's really cool. Instead of chucking it away, then something really useful. I don't understand why it would just be children rather than grown-ups. And grown-ups have more free time as well. So.
The arrival of COVID last year means the NHS has been using more plastic.
So pre-COVID, we were using about 300 masks a day, just for theatres mostly. And then COVID struck, and that increased to 10,000 a day.
This machine is being tipped as the answer. It melts masks and tray wraps and can reach temperatures of over 300 degrees Celsius.
Obviously, we need to remove the ear straps and the wire that sits over your nose. Basically, it's just like a giant oven, you know, it melts it all down, and that makes one of the big blocks, which then gets taken away and ground down into plastic granules and repurposed.
45 masks are needed to make each picker. The hospital recognises repurposing is not a perfect solution, but says it's better than using an incinerator.
At the moment, this is the best that we have. We all want to get to reusable PPE. That's the end result. But the barriers are there for a very good reason, and we must stick with them to keep our staff and patients safe. And that will happen. I think that's just a matter of time.
All 332 schools and colleges across Cornwall will be given their own pickers in the coming weeks. But the hope is that one day it will be safe enough to reuse masks in more healthcare settings and further reduce the NHS's environmental footprint. Laura Foster, BBC News, Truro.
Lava flowing from the volcano that erupted on the Spanish island of La Palma on Sunday has now destroyed a school and more than 200 houses. Nearly 6,000 people who live near the Cumbre Vieja volcano have been evacuated. Lava is flowing at an estimated speed of 300 meters an hour down towards the sea. You can see it here going into a swimming pool. But the worry is that when it gets to the sea, it could trigger explosions and toxic gases. Dan Johnson, our correspondent, is on the island.
A fourth day of eruptions here. The volcano just keeps rumbling, keeps spewing out lava. It's actually probably about the calmest that we've seen it this morning. It's not as fierce as it has been for most of the last 3 days and nights, but it never stops, and nobody can do anything to stop or control the lava that's flowing down the hillside from it. So it's scorched right across the landscape. There's a huge black scar across the hillsides here, and everything that the lava touches sets on fire, gets burned or gets buried by the sheer volume of that lava. It's really destructive. It's been a spectacular display. These are nature's fireworks and some of nature's strongest forces at work, but it certainly is doing huge damage, not just to the landscape here, but to villages and homes. We saw a village right down at the bottom of the lava flow being evacuated yesterday. People were given the chance just to grab a few last things and get to safety before their homes were engulfed by the lava. And it's really distressing to see that, because people are leaving their homes behind, knowing that they will never be able to go back there. Even buildings that aren't actually destroyed by the lava are probably going to be cut off, or will be in such a dangerous position that they'll have to be abandoned. So this is a really big issue for the future of those communities and how this island recovers from this.
The streaming service Netflix has bought the works of children's author Roald Dahl in its biggest content deal to date. Some of those classics, including Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and the BFG, will now be developed for streaming on Netflix to help it build its content arsenal in the on-screen wars against those big rivals Disney Plus, Amazon Prime Video, and HBO Max. The Roald Dahl estate offers a huge global opportunity for Netflix. His books have been translated into 63 languages and sold more than 300 million copies. See you again in a few weeks.
This is NPN Network Media News for